We're here today with Toronto-based lawyer Timothy Kinnaird, who will be providing us with some general information on spousal support and how you can move forward knowing your rights. So Timothy, the first thing I think I'd like to ask is, if I'm getting an uncontested divorce, do my partner and I have to work out our spousal support issues, or can I get that divorce before they're resolved?
Well, Dee Dee, support for the children, yes, that has to be resolved. But for spousal support, no. I have found that spousal support is usually the most contentious issue between separated spouses. For some people, paying money to another after years of having had that person live with them apparently for free while they worked drives them crazy. In my practice, I've seen some quit their jobs, give away their money to girlfriends, go underground, all to avoid paying their ex-spouse a penny for their personal support. I can only recommend that if you suspect your ex-spouse may be so rash and so cruel to go to such lengths, get some advice before you separate and contact our office so that you can be ready to get a court order freezing assets and bank accounts so that you and your children are not left destitute and maybe even homeless by the sheer spite and bitterness of your ex-spouse. Though it's usually men who pay support, you may find that actually at times it's the woman who has to pay their husbands, especially if they're stay-at-home dads to their children, which is not an uncommon thing these days.
So when is a spouse entitled to spousal support?
Well, if it isn't mandated by a domestic agreement between the parties, like a prenuptial agreement, then a spouse is entitled to support from the other for the two following reasons. If he or she has suffered an economic loss arising from the marriage, for example, a foregone career or something like that, or if indeed he or she is in real need of money for such basics as rent and food as a result of the separation. And of course, when we say needs, they are usually related to the former lifestyle of the couple. So if you're used to having a new car, fine clothes, and lots of vacations, they may very well be the type of needs that the other must continue to pay you for.
And how much should spousal support be?
Well, Dee Dee, there are published guidelines to which the courts are following almost automatically these days. They are referred to as the Spousal Support Advisory Guidelines. And if you click on the link below, you can get an approximate estimate of what you should be receiving, given both incomes of the parties and any child support that may also be payable by that spouse.
How long should spousal support be paid?
Again, Dee Dee, the Spousal Support Advisory Guidelines should be consulted, as they also provide a rough estimate for how long spousal support should be granted, given the age of the recipient, the length of the marriage, and a host of other factors that may include children. Normally, as long as the spouse is financially dependent as a result of a marriage, he or she may be entitled to support, sometimes for a lifetime. There's something called the 65 rule, which if you add in years the length of your relationship with the other, which starts not at the marriage date, but actually when you start living together, and the age of your ex-spouse, and that equals 65 or more, well, you're looking at the prospect of lifelong spousal support. Now, as I stated before, this issue is usually the most difficult to be resolved, and the parties do not need to settle it immediately in order to obtain a divorce. It's been my experience that getting the divorce first usually leads to a more amicable settlement because the emotional sting of the breaking up of the marriage has had time to settle in and become a reality. So if the parties wish to postpone the issue or have in place a satisfactory temporary arrangement, they too can take advantage of our online services to get their divorce and save thousands of dollars.
So what do you recommend and can offer those who want to resolve their spousal support issues either before or after a divorce?
Well, if the matter is simply a question of taking into account both parties' take-home pay, and after a reasonable discussion about how long the separated ex-spouse may need to either get an education or perhaps get the training in order to get a decent job and become self-sufficient, perhaps our basic separation agreement forms may be the least expensive and the quickest way to resolve this issue. As always, if things become too complicated or a party too unreasonable, please feel free to contact one of our lawyers to discuss further possibilities.
So Tim, for those who have children, how does child support or having children factor into spousal support payments?
Well, children always come first, and if your viewers go watch our video on child support in custody, they will better understand how that's a priority and how that's calculated. There is only so much money the other spouse earns, and if after child support he has little or nothing left for spousal support, Well, the sad fact is that spouse has to go out and get work to support herself or himself.
If you could leave our audience with one good piece of advice based on your experience, what would that be?
If your spouse has just left and he or she still has a good job, money in the bank, and other assets, speed is of the essence to ensure that you get the maximum support for you and the kids. Anything can happen: accidents, illnesses, bad habits like alcoholism or depression, or even a new boyfriend or girlfriend that your ex would rather spend their money on. The longer you wait to get your support, to get your divorce, and go your separate ways, the greater the risk is that there'll be nothing left for you or your children. So if you need help in getting the optimal amount of spousal support, please feel free to contact our office immediately.
So basically, do it quickly,
That's
or
right.
else you might be left out in the cold.
You bet.
That's very wise advice. Thank you, Tim.